Blessings, everyone. Welcome back to That's What's Up with Qiyamah Muhammad. And we're here with our guest for today, Mr. Lyle. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Lyle Dennis.
It's an honor.
I'm an artist, designer, and I here on What's Up. And today, Qiyamah is going to ask me a few questions.
Yep, and we'll get everyone to know your story and your experience, and that's what's up is about. Just sharing the experiences of those in the albinism community. Thank you for being my guest for today. I know we went off on a rough start a little earlier, but glad that you're able to be here today.
Yes.
Okay, so we can start with your childhood. So first, do you know how your parents reacted or how they felt knowing they had a child with albinism?
I really don't know. I've never asked my mother that question. I've been more or less concentrated on dealing with whatever life dealt me to even consider what that answer to that question may have been.
But so you don't know how she might have reacted or just feelings in general?
Not really. That's not a subject that my mother and my father and I ever broached. So it's just been, I'm the same as everyone else.
So do you think maybe you'll ever touch on that subject?
Not at this age. And we're both kind of old for that. And I don't really think that that's an important item for me in what my life objective has been and or helping me to get there. So I look at it in this manner. I came into this world and my mother took care of me till I was about 18 years of age. And from that point in time, we've just been good friends dealing with life.
Excuse me. That's understandable. So it's just kind of just living life, not really bothering with anything else.
Yeah, because I think anything else is kind of inconsequential. But we, have to all consider the possibility of what each human being has to do in their life and what God has put us here on this earth to do.
How having that goal in life that you want to reach and just, pursuing what you want to do.
Yes, and that for me is sort of like a continuum. There's always new goals set and new objectives to be achieved.
So how was your school life growing up?
My elementary, or as far back as I can remember?
At any point, you can go from elementary.
Well, elementary was kind of strenuous because of the fact of the time frame that I was born, in addition to the fact that there was no one like me around. So it took me a great deal of adjusting to deal with having to go from all Black environment to an integrated environment. And some of the hurdles that I had to overcome were, of course, fighting, in addition to making certain that I was able to do the work and be attentive to what the teacher was saying. And for me, that was inclusive of hearing more so than seeing always. I've learned through actual work and listening to what others had to say.
Mm-hmm. So how were the resources, if if there were many, how were
Well,
they like?
the resources were fairly well presented from the educational standpoint, because during the time when I was transitioning from your high, we were moved from a segregated situation to an integrated situation. So the integrated situation had basically all the resources that were needed for a young person to thrive and achieve whatever they wanted to do. And I, fortunately enough, after my first failure of the 7th grade, because I didn't go to school, because that adjustment period was somewhat traumatic. So I did not go through that process of regular attendance to school. And then when my mom found out that I had been hooking school, that had become a real issue with her. And that never happened then afterward. So I just refocused what I needed to do. And I focused more so on music, the arts, and got down to the basic educational requirements that were needed in order to get a high school diploma.
Well, speaking of music and everything, how did you get interested in music?
Well, my great aunt and uncle were ministers in the church, and the music came from being in the church choir, and then eventually in the community choir when I got a little older. And that ideal love of music has always followed me. And now it's difficult for me to get into the groove of things without having my own brand of music and the things that I like and appreciate. So by the time I was in the 10th grade, I kind of made a decision as to which direction I wanted to take my life. And the art and design sort of like won out over music. But the music still carries me.
So it's like the music is like basically having your back while you have your
Exactly.
interest in art and design.
The idea of jazz and the classical music, helps to calm one's mind and allows you to focus on whatever the task is at hand and gives you the opportunity to dream.
So what are some of those dreams that you have or have had in the past while you were growing up?
Well, to travel, to do my artwork, eventually the need or desire to be married, and I did so. And that was for a good 27 years to a wonderful woman that I love very much. And now I'm on a new life path.
So what are some of the goals that you've set for yourself now for the present and moving forward?
Well, given the fact that now we're finally out of COVID, and I believe, and when I first met you, that was during the period where my wife had just passed away, and that was almost 9 or 10 months thereafter. And I had not really taken the opportunity to engage with too many other persons with albinism because I was always focused on what was necessary, not whatever the status quo or the stigmas that were assigned to persons with albinism. That was not important to me. I stayed focused on my objective or objectives, and as time went on, those things began to change and evolve into other things.
First of all, I'm sorry for your loss, and just, so, excuse me.
Well, dear, it's part of life, and you open up a brand new door for me because of the place where we first met. And remember, it was at the Martin Luther King Library, and that was where I had my first exhibition. And from that, it kind of like gave me a wake-up call that, maybe now is the time for me to change what my objectives were and start to focus on doing my own artwork. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been, preparing myself to get ready to do so. And the good thing is, I started reaching out to other persons with albinism and trying to give them some point of view of, what they can do and help them to understand that their limitations are only as limited as their mindset is.
I'm glad I was able to be that point, so that could help you branch out into, where you are now with linking up with others with albinism.
Well, growing up, there were no other persons like that. And I don't think I met my first person with albinism until I was like 20 years old. And that was a young man who had very, very low visual acuity. And he had a different background because he was Caucasian. So he had a different perspective as to what life could and could not be. And then later on, I encountered a couple other brothers and sisters here in the Washington metropolitan area. And throughout the course of my travels, I have met other persons with albinism. However, given the fact that there were long distance circumstances, the communications at that time were not like we can do now.
So did you ever think that you would meet others after meeting that young man?
Well, I was kind of hopeful that that would be the case. And, I started looking at the numbers of, persons with albinism in the United States. And back then it was still kind of low, and looked at it from a global perspective. And, that number was still even staggering. But I found that there were more persons with albinism on the continent of Africa than probably anywhere else. And since they were from a Negro community and Negro parents, it was a little easier for me to be able to identify it with them.
So how were those meetings with others let me start that over. So how were your experiences with those that were also like Black albinos or just others that weren't white?
From African descent, they were interesting. They had somewhat the same point of view that I had in reference to the manner in which they interacted with the community. But for the most part, my travels in being able to actually really engage on a very personal level was always limited because of my security. And as that was the case, there were only, maybe about 4 or 5 persons that I had the opportunity to interact with. Mm. And I never really had an opportunity to really sit down and have a long conversation, with the exception of my friend Tommy Bryant, who's also in the Washington metropolitan area. So it was a good experience, I say, for what I could absorb at the time. Mm-hmm. Because during that particular time, my business was doing a lot of different things in reference to publishing, and I was teaching from time to time. So my whole reality was just a little different.
Mm. It's like having different point of views. Well, not point of views, but just, well, like you said, like a different view.
Well, there were different time constraints. Mm-hmm. And the time constraints did not allow me to really engage and sit down and have a beer or have a long conversation with any of those persons. Mm-hmm. And that was principally the main reason, because my scheduling was meeting after meeting, mm-hmm. depending on where I was in the world.
So well, I guess moving forward, are you still in contact with some of those people? I know you said that you talk with your friend, but any of the other people that you've met, are you still in contact with them as well?
Well, a few of them, yes. A lot of them are people that I communicate with on Facebook, but my friend Tommy Bryant, he's here in the Washington area. So we've had an opportunity to meet and talk, he and his wife and I, and we've been communicating off and on, but because of his schedule, because he's a musician and he was also a teacher, we both had very hectic schedules. Mm-hmm. So it became a situation where, we would meet up or hook up whenever we could. Mm-hmm.
With, would you, I guess when there's free time with others, would, trying to figure out how to work this out. I'll get
out with it.
That point.
Okay. It's easier when you're interviewing to just be direct and to the point.
I don't think we kind of talk through it, but get to a different point.
Okay.
So you've mentioned your business and everything. Would you mind, or would you, talk more about that and how you got started? And
well, I started the business out of necessity. Mm. It wasn't something that I went to school for, but I had classes that allowed me to have a good understanding of what it meant to do business as a freelance person. And after college, we had transitioned from the old process of doing graphics and industrial design to utilizing more computers and dealing with things that were more in the line of higher end communication. And as I managed to grasp what that process was, I found myself developing a desktop publishing system that I eventually helped to set up the DC school desktop publishing system. And as that went from there to a few universities, and those were sort of like my community goodwill things that I needed to do as far as a business person. But my business, as for the most part, we designed public relations and marketing campaigns for Fortune 100 and 500 corporations. And through our publishing, we had an opportunity to create a book on the historical Black colleges and universities. And from that point, it spun off into dealing with the lack thereof of federal assistance for those HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions to be able to have an opportunity to do research and development. So we developed 2 different campaigns that helped those HBCUs to get funding from the federal government so they could expand their research capabilities and their faculty and staffing in order to get the process more to the minority communities. So we were sort of like a conduit to be able to help the federal government address issues where it was lacking in their diversity programs. And their diversity programs needed to really be addressed because the politics during that time were very, very dogmatic in the process of giving African Americans and Latin Americans avenues to which they could utilize the sciences and technologies. So we helped to, implement ideals and concepts for STEM programming and basic research and marketing so that whenever the universities were able to get with a business entity to allow those business entities to create products that could come to market.
So was that idea stemmed from personal experiences, or was it just how you were observing things that you all wanted to touch on that subject instead of others?
Well, it was from personal experiences because we had become an 8A contractor. And as that process had gone into effect, there were certain requirements that I needed to fulfill. And as we saw that these opportunities for these HBCUs were really dwindling and the resources were not there comparative to, some of the Ivy League schools or even some of the community colleges that had, small research opportunities, they were not going, or the funding were not going to the HBCUs. So my wife was she worked on Capitol Hill as an LA and an advisor. So we started to implement what we knew and understand about the process of marketing and knowing the HBCU community, since, our families had a long history in dealing with those HBCUs and her father was an engineer, it became a situation where we were able to quickly access NASA and a lot of the other agencies that were doing research and development and get them on board with the program that we had come up with called the University and Business Technology Summits. So we coordinated the federal government and the universities to be able to sit down and talk about what the ideals were for expanding the research capabilities. Because by law, back in 94, 95, there was a requirement for the federal government to begin the process of more inclusion. But it was difficult for the HBCU community to really get to those major resources. So we set up a conduit for those universities to be able to tap into those federal resources to expand their infrastructure and to bring on teaching staff that could help to bring the faculty into a realization of what it meant to do research and have that research set to applied sciences.
Were there any like major obstacles that you all faced?
Oh yes. Being a minority was number one, period. And we had to be registered in order to really do any serious kind of work with the federal government and the local governments. So there were meetings that we had to attend at the Pentagon and NASA and a few of the other agencies, the Department of Interior and so forth and so on, to be able to ensure that we could get the contracts that we were looking for and to help to support and undergird our programming that we developed. So as a process of doing that, we had to learn the regulations, the laws. And in doing that, it gave us, understanding of which direction we could really focus our energy in order to not be waylaid with the politics and or the BS that usually follows in the context of government.
But I guess, not I guess, but after, after overcoming those struggles, you all, were y'all planning to, make a book? Was that like the end goal, or was that just part of the motion and the flow?
Well, when we published the book, it was based upon the fact that there was not a lot of data and information about the HBCUs at that time. None of them had online representation, and we thought that it would be more productive to have a tabletop publication that people could look at and have a sense of connectedness to those universities. And that was one of the principal tools back during the, it started in Bush 1, and then it went to Clinton, but the financing and the resources did not come about until President Clinton signed a bill which allocated something like $600 million for HBCUs to begin the process of restructuring their research and technology divisions in the universities. So part and parcel, it was something that we did intentionally, but it was primarily based on the fact of exclusion because those universities were not represented.
Is this book still available to?
Well, we stopped publishing the book in, I think it was 1999. But it's still the previous editions are in the Library of Congress because they were one of our partners in publishing the book. And a lot of the corporate Fortune 100s were our sponsors in order to get the book published every year.
So do you have any links or website that that would like detail your work or?
Well, let me say this, the book was a launching point in order to go into more in-depth with the research and development. And we use it as a public relations tool in order to get opportunities for small business research or small innovative research for companies, small companies, by having them partner with the universities. So after, I think it was 97, we started transitioning into doing more conferences so that there was a direct line of contact with the universities, the provosts, the research persons, and the program developers at all of the agencies. So our focus, even though we still maintain other kinds of publication, it was more directed toward facilitating opportunities for the small businesses and also for the universities. So they have been conferences and things of that nature, which I still maintain our current web page for global sustainability, because sustainability is oftentimes driven by research. New ideas, new technologies, new techniques are how the concept of sustainability is really moved forward. And with the right politics, you know, sometimes it can be very formidable in making change with businesses and the universities. During the period of time when my wife had become ill, I closed down the business for collectively about almost 7 years, because our last event that we did was with the international community at the US Senate, and it was based upon the concepts of technology and how technology can impact sustainable development. So it was based upon infrastructure development, agricultural requirements, and being able to deal with items of reforestation and water, because all those things are really a necessary reality for sustainability to be able to help, you know, the earth heal itself, because collectively mankind has done a lot of really bizarre things in the sake or for the sake of money without understanding what the consequences of their actions were. So we were a bridge to governments and universities to be able to marry those businesses that would have an interest in setting up these kinds of business opportunities that the federal government or the US federal government has specifically in their federal laboratories.
So do you have any other like more projects related to that now, or are your goals like more are your goals more different in the present?
Well, I still have some of those goals because back in 2019, I finally decided I was going to get back on the horse and deal with a couple of projects that my colleagues have in Brazil. And then COVID started in 2020. So they have since made a request that I begin the process of trying to reestablish that process for them to get access to technologies and access to funding resources for their sustainable development programs. So I'm hoping that near the end of October this year, I'll be in Brazil for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to bring a delegation of the universities, the municipal government, and their businesses to Washington to introduce them to the possibilities of what can and what cannot be.
hopefully everything goes smoothly and have safe travels. And
Well, I do hope so too. All my colleagues have been very skeptical about me going to Brazil because of COVID, but I've been in Sierra Leone when they've had outbreak of cholera. So being in a real bizarre situation where your health is at great risk, I've been there, done that, and understand how to best protect myself and to conduct the business that I have to conduct. So a little experience sometimes goes a long way.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but that can go for anything, just
Oh, yes,
like in everyday life.
every day.
That just from what you've mentioned before, that's great work. And like I know uh, it's been a couple years since um, the publishing stopped, but um, it's great that the material is still out there for more.
Oh, oh yes, the book was distributed throughout the United States and abroad via the U.S. Department of Defense, because the Defense Secretary had a requirement in order to help African Americans that were in the military to get higher education. And as a tool, they utilized the publication as a means for the military to be able to understand what these universities could do and the opportunities that they could then pass on to the servicemen in order to help make their lives better when they got out of the service.
Great work.
Beg your pardon?
I was saying it's great work.
Well, there's things we do and we keep on doing. And my life has just been a compilation of one line of success or failure moving into another opportunity. And opportunity is based upon your preparedness and readiness to take advantage of it.
Did you ever think that you'd be like on this line of work or
Well, it was my intention to be an artist. Like I was saying earlier, by the time I'd gotten into the 9th grade, I had already made that decision that I was not going to go with music, that I was going to go with the art and design. I still have not been able to get back to the art so much, but I'm working on that again. I mean, I've done, little things, but in my latter years, I want to be able to focus and concentrate more on doing my artwork and still doing, the civil service, or I like to think of it as being civil service for the different places that I have enjoyed visiting and spending time.
so regarding your art and albinism, how would you say that not affected, but how it's influenced or
Well, to be honest with you, when I was first asked, well, what is it that you want to do? And then I made a decision that I wanted to do art. My counselor had said, well, that requires a lot of visual acuity. And even in the industrial design classes, they had advocated that that was something that you needed to be able to really have a keen sense of vision. But I had not the greatest of vision, but I managed to take my perspective and the manner in which I see things and turn it to my advantage.
so how would you describe that your how would you describe that your perception is in your art? Like, if you would describe it in words, how would you tell it to someone?
I see things in shapes, forms, and color. And in seeing things in shapes, forms, and color, and size, and that gives me a sense of the ideals that come out of my mind. Sometimes when you see things exactly the way they are, the reality is not that pleasant. But when you can see it from a different point of view, whether it's later or lesser visual acuity or greater visual acuity, the expression that you put behind whatever the images that you're creating allows you to be able to establish your own style and the things that you need to do. That's where I want to try to get to now in my later days. But prior to that, most of my work was based upon what my clientele had demand for. So I had to appease them in order to be paid. Now I'm at a different mindset where it's not so much that I'm working for somebody else. I'm doing what I really prefer to do. Even though I've been fortunate enough to kind of do what I want to do, being in business, but had I not gotten the rejection from places of employment, I would have never started my business. So from that perspective, it helped me to grow into other areas and doing the research that made me say, what if?
So would you say that like it was just like those rejections were a necessary point to get where you are right now?
Oh yes, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Because when one door closes, if you're tenacious enough, you find a way to open a new door.
Mm-hmm. There's always going to be something, someone, somehow, some way to get where you need to be.
Oh yes, even events and circumstances that are way beyond your control, i.e. the COVID virus. I had hoped that, those things would have been resolved in a couple of months. It's been a year now and I haven't been able to travel. And that's one thing I love to do is travel.
Speaking, well, before you get to that, we're still regarding your art. Um, is there somewhere that people can see what you've done or your different art projects?
Well, I have links. I've been developing links over the last couple of years that shows some of my artwork and gives an overview of my professional expertise and business expertise. But I don't utilize that as access to all. I only utilize it for the galleries that I've approached because I'm preparing once I get all my coffers refilled up and my contacts and determine where on this earth I'm going to live out the latter days of my life. I need to have that vehicle, or I created that vehicle so that sending things to the potential galleries that would represent me, I only have the direct links to the photographs that I've had of my previous artwork. And one piece that I've been doing over the last 9 or 10 months since COVID's been here. And that hasn't been finished yet, but that link is available. And there is a website for, my business activities. Would you like that?
Yes, please. And we can put them in the description so anybody could go and check that out.
Okay. That website is www.sdgrotto.ga. And it gives a background and history of my corporation and the things that we've done with the federal government and other entities with regard to sustainability and dealing with international influencers.
We can, once this is already, we'll have that in the description. So anybody can go and, see, so anybody can see what your work has been like, and what you're doing and all that. What's been your favorite place that you've traveled so far?
Favorite?
If you could pick one.
It's kind of hard to say. Well, my favorite place that I've traveled with my wife has been basically, I would say the one place is Nimas. And as far as my business travels, I would say probably Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi and Dubai.
I guess this also would go into, well, before I say that, still, I guess directed towards your art, what kind of art do you do? Like, what's your main focus?
Well, I tried to define it in a term when I was in college, and the term that I came up with is geographic. And that, in its sense, is geometric forms in a highly graphic sense.
Mm-hmm. So, since with the places you've traveled, would you take inspiration from those places into?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. In Morocco, all the different patterns and the patterns from the Middle East, mm-hmm. Those images are kind of like still embedded in the back of my mind. And I haven't had the opportunity to really express that on canvas or any other media. In South America, being in the different places and the different countries, which they all have their distinctive motifs of their artwork and their community, all of those things have been put in the recesses of my mind. And once I get a chance to really take advantage of free time, then some of those things that I've seen, I'm going to try to implement them within the context of my artwork, because it's a part of my life experience. And as a photographer, I've always taken photos of the places that I've gone and the things that I've done. So it's not only a mental reality, I still have some physical points of remembrance of those events and activities that I was engaged in.
Mm-hmm. It's like you'll always have those memories, like not just in here, but like physical copies of.
Yeah, it's just an easier point of reference to be able to, just go to a file and pull something up that I saw that really intrigued me, and find out how I can best incorporate it into whatever the piece of work that I'm going to be doing.
So you don't just do like photography and like, is it painting or not painting, but like drawing?
Well, I do that plus sculpture, ceramics. I used to do a lot of serigraphies when I was younger, but all those things I'm hoping I will be able to get back to once I decide that, okay, now's the time to just be an artist. Let the business be aside for a while and just go and focus in on what your self-expressions are.
What would you say that your favorite type, or like one of the types that is easiest to get your vision out in?
I guess painting is the easiest, because sculpting, it usually takes, if I'm sculpting in wood, I've got to do a lot of carving, or if I'm doing stone, that's even harder. So I think the easiest medium for me to do is painting, and I prefer doing acrylic paint versus doing oil paints.
And I guess that would be kind of a silly question about vision affecting it, but so I'm still trying to.
I think I know what you're going to ask, but I'm going to try to see if I can help you in this question. Back during the period of time when the Impressionists, Van Gogh and all the other Impressionist artists, Pissarro and so forth and so on, when they presented their paintings, the establishment felt that, oh, well, this is not a Degas, this is not Michelangelo, the forms are not in the perfect order. And they broke from tradition. And to me, I felt that their perspective had given them a new sense of what could be, because they use either points of color and shape with light to be able to have that expression. And when it gets right down to it, it's a matter of what you feel and what you can express and convey in whatever the medium is that you're working in, whether you're doing silk screens or paintings or sculpting. It's all a matter of your own self-conveyance in the context of that piece of artwork that you're creating. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you. I was having a little bit trouble trying to word that, but yeah.
Well, I understand. I've been on that side of the table a lot. So asking questions of people to find out what it is that I want to know.
You did a great job at explaining that. Thank you.
It's quite all right there.
And I guess moving on from your art and everything. So with media, there's not been a really positive representation. What's your feelings regarding the the I guess representation would be a good word for it, regarding people with albinism.
Well, let me say this. I grew up in an era and time when the first Black person was seen on television. And it has grown exponentially over the years. With regard to persons with albinism, I'm seeing a lot more things coming about that are positive points of view. My associate and good friend who gave me some really good information, Salif Keita, when I was in Mali, he's been performing for many years now. And his music has begun the process of, making the idea of persons with albinism a reality in the entertainment business. But still, even to that point, our conversations have been that he feels that the recognition level is still not as high as it could be because of, the difference. And, sometimes life being an albino in the world carries a double-edged sword. And you're sometimes chastised by your race and or culture, but there's the other side of the sword where once people have a discernment of who they believe you to be, that stigma becomes even more pronounced. So the media and the way that anyone presents themselves is up to the collective. And every collective has to begin the process of determining what is good representation of who they wish to be associated with and or aligned with, and set those parameters.
And it's, I guess with me personally, just seeing any type of media, I've not seen that much or that many portrayals of albinism, just like that negative side. And even though I've known there's like a couple models here and there that are albino, and it's like that younger generation, like I'm not part of that generation.
Okay. Younger generation.
But it's like the younger children, they'll be able to see those role models when, say, like their parents or their friends haven't been able to. That's just, nice to think about, knowing that there's more people that are going to be out in the spotlight and come up for the children that also has albinism and thinks that there's nobody else like them. And so if they see like a movie or read a book that has that negative perspective on albinism, it's like, yeah, no, that's not how it is.
Well, the truth of the matter is there are lots of other things that are out there And sometimes they remain to be anonymous, just like a lot of the scientists. You don't see a lot of scientists, except for the Nobel Prize winners, that things are touted about. Mm. And depending on the individual as to how personal or how public they choose to be, those persons can be a positive and or negative influence to others, not just in the albinism community, but I mean, earlier, I remember back in the late 80s or the beginning of the 90s, when all of that rap music, or I guess they call it gangster rap, when that became a negative influence, there were people who, you know, voiced their opinions. And I noticed over the years that the tone of the music had changed. It became something that was a little more inspirational versus something that they were always complaining about the man or their lady friends, which they called different names that didn't really make any sense to me. It just happened to change. And that was because the society itself deemed that, oh, we've got to change this. And you are a young person and you have started your media campaign and you're beginning to present more ideals and other individuals that have a degree of accomplishment that could act as role models or persons to inspire those other persons that are like them. They won't know unless they've seen it. They have nothing to emulate.
Then it's like, if they do want to, it's find that role model. They just hope it won't be that hard to find it. Like, either say tomorrow or just in the next few years, they'll be able to have that, you know, that point of reference. And
yes, well, with the onset of the social media programs and the availability and access to information, that's a little easier for the younger generation to be able to do so. When I was going to school and a young person, I had to always go to the library in order to research whatever it was that I wanted to have an understanding thereof. Now you can Google and get just about anything that you want to Google online. So the social media has been a huge impact upon the way people act and respond. When I first met you, I did not really interact with a lot of persons with albinism. The few people that I did know and come to know, it was based upon proximity. And now you can have a conversation with anyone, anywhere in the world through the vehicle of social media. But the important thing that you must remember is that any person who has will and desire will have to go through a certain degree of work to be able to know who and what the possibilities are, but more importantly, understand that there's no door that I can't kick in, or no other way that I can get around. There's always a way. And as long as one has belief in self and God, there's nothing that cannot be accomplished. I mean, a lot of people told me, you're going to be a visual artist? And you can't even see past your nose. But here I am.
Right. It's like, look at you now.
Yep. 35 years later in business, doing what I want to do.
Like, it's like, there's really not a time limit. If you have that goal that you have in mind, or just like an end goal, or just any point that you want to start or stop at, there's no time limit that is going to stop you from getting there.
Nothing. Nothing in this world.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I guess that could start with start. That can go into the last words that might have, or words of advice. I know you just dropped that bomb for anybody who'll watch this, but if there are any other words of advice, or um, last words that you'd like to give to either people with albinism, or just people in general.
Well, I'll say this, and this is what I've always said to the younger people that have done internships with me. And I always try to, present what has worked for me and that makes sense. You have to, number one, have faith in yourself and know that God put you here for a reason. You got to find out what that reason is. And you have to understand that every step that you take is the process of preparing you to get to that point. It may seem insignificant now. It may seem like it's the worst thing in this world that could have possibly happened to you, but everything has a reason. We have to learn to accept the things that we cannot change. But also at the same time, we have to learn to change the things that are necessary.
And like I always tell my guests, I'm gonna keep those words personal as well. Just it's always something that you can take from others. I'll definitely be keeping that in mind as well, like moving forward.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that my grandfather used to tell me. If you listen to old people and you make your own direction, you'll always have an easier road to hoe. And remember that nothing ventured is nothing gained. Okay?
Right. Yeah. I'll be keeping that in mind as well, and hopefully people who will watch this will take those words of advice as well.
Well,
and if there's and the link you mentioned, if you could mention that just one more time.
The website is sdggrotto.ga.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your experiences and your life. And maybe if time permits it, we could have a part 2, so we could probably go deeper and talk about anything else that would come up.
Well, maybe we can even do it with some of the other folks who are older that are in the metropolitan area. And like they say, when you get old, you don't get to be old unless you have some understanding of that which is around you.
I would love to do that. Like, that would definitely be an idea that we that I could, start, and hopefully you'll be a part of it, and bring bring some others, and we'll share their lives and just and everything.
Well, I do look forward to it, and I trust you have a good afternoon. I'm getting ready to go back to work because I'm starting to do some reconstruction on my sister's porch, which I have to get done before I go on travel. So I'm working again 13 hours a week. 13 hours a day trying to get all these things completed before it's time for me to break camp.
Mm-hmm. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this with me. And it was wonderful hearing what you had to say.
Okay. Well.
So thank you so much. This has been That's What's Up with Mr. Lyle Dennis. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Au revoir. Hasta luego.
Peace.